All right, so this week, as John said, Brian Wilson died from the Beach Boys, and
That's the one.
What's that?
I was remembering another big death happened this week, and it slipped my mind.
Here's the thing. He once supposedly had several mental breakdowns. One time he went into his bedroom supposedly for a year and didn't come out.
Lucky.
I read that.
Is there in your mind, who's the most likely Philadelphia comedian to spend a year in their bedroom? Do you have any idea? I mean, to spend a year depressed in their bed, probably a lot of them, right?
Who's not? You don't want to test that.
If you help bring Charles Manson into popularity, I'd have gotten hiding for a year.
That was his brother, Dennis Wilson. That wasn't him. That was Dennis.
That's by proxy, because no one would know Dennis if they didn't know him.
That was Dennis. That was Dennis and Neil Young. You can't blame Brian for that.
Safari with me. Like Charles Manson writing beach songs about killing Sharon Tate.
Brian was too busy having breakdowns every 5 minutes.
Because they all of that certain period, like God only knows, like the layers of harmonies and the wall sounds, or but he must have been popping, doing whatever he's doing. Drugs.
I was listening to an interview that he did with Terry Gross from 1988. They were replaying it this week on Fresh Air, and he was talking about all the drugs he was doing in the 60s. Yeah, he was out of his mind with all the drugs.
I think he was burnout. Like for inspiration, you heard this. He had a ton or two tons of sand dumped in his living room with a big grand piano, and he thought if he could put his toes in sand to help him write beach music, but his mind wasn't thinking right. But there's a famous story where in like 1974, 75, when John Lennon was out in Los Angeles.
At the Grammys? You saw him at the Grammys when he went up to Alice Cooper and Bernie Taupin, that whole thing?
It's a great story. Yeah. And it was the after dinner party?
It was the after party at the Grammys, and it's Alice Cooper and John Lennon and Bernie Taupin. Bernie Taupin is Elton John's songwriting partner. And Alice Cooper whispers to Bernie Taupin, "Hey, can you introduce me to John Lennon?"
No. But Brian Wilson asked.
Brian Wilson says to Bernie Taupin, "Can you introduce me to John Lennon?" So he introduced John. This is Brian Wilson, and Lennon says, "Oh, Brian, I'm a big fan. Me and Paul loved your music." And he leaves. And about 10 minutes later, he goes up to Alice Cooper. Brian Wilson does. "Hey, can you introduce me to John Lennon?" And Alice Cooper introduces him, and John Lennon says, "Oh, Brian, it's nice to meet you. I'm a big fan. The Beatles love the Beach Boys." He leaves, and they look at John Lennon, and John Lennon says, "I met him 100 times. The boy's not well."
yeah. Alice Cooper said, "I can't believe you guys never met." He goes, "I met him 100 times." I just read something today. In 1972, Elvis was recording at some famous recording house in L.A., and Brian Wilson was recording next door. And this is when he was big, heavy, and big with a beard. He goes walking in, he goes, and Elvis stares at him like, "Who the hell is this guy? Don't I have security?" And he goes, "Hi, Elvis, I'm Brian." And he goes, "Oh, nice to meet you." And he goes, "You want to come next door and listen to what I'm working on?" And Elvis looks around and goes, "Yeah, sure." And then Brian Wilson said, "I remember Elvis liked karate." And he goes like a karate chop. Well, he goes, Elvis did a karate chop back to him, but really hit him like whack on the arm. And Brian goes, "It hurt."
Then the other story I heard about Brian Wilson, which I bet it's not true, but it's a funny story. He's doing a concert, and Don Henley from the Eagles comes backstage to meet him, and he's got his vinyl copy of Pet Sounds, the Beach Boys legendary album.
I read this.
I'm not sure. I question his story. And he asked him if he would sign it. So Brian Wilson signs it. "Don, thanks for all the great music," and gives it to him. And then Don Henley's leaving, and Brian Wilson says, wait a minute, calls him back, takes the album back and crosses out "great" and writes "good." Like, thanks for all the good. I don't know if he would really did sold him like that. I mean, that is funny. If it is true, it's funny. But I don't. That's pretty good.
People are the butt of a lot of jokes.
I got a good Brian Wilson CD. He recorded it live at the Home Shopping Network or QVC, the one in our area. It was in Malvern. Whatever. He recorded it live, and it's actually really good. And he had to do the other Beach Boys voices. He had Michael Sembello from Maniac from that, and Christopher Cross.
Wow, really?
They're recording the harmonies.
John Stamos?
Yes.
Well, John Stamos played drums later. Dennis Wilson was the drummer, right? And he drowned, which is ironic that one of the Beach Boys drowned. That is the funniest thing.
And he was the only one who served.
Actually drowned.
That's like Paul Walker levels.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
One of the Beach Boys. John Lennon, he wrote the song "Happiness is a Warm Gun," and he got shot. So there you go.
I just read that John Stamos first played with them in 1985 at that Washington Memorial thing. Remember that, the guy?
Right. Well, that James Watt. That was after Dennis Wilson drowned in '83 or '84.
And
so
but he's with them like ever since, like on and off and on.
Yeah, on and off.
Comedy Train Wreck.